Well, good morning. Um, it's a little chilly this morning. Had to put the sweatshirt on, and a little urgency. I think I'm a teacher on summer break, and summer is quickly ending. So we'll be going to school, back to school here in a little over a week, and so kind of like enjoying Esther, enjoying chewing on Esther, and even the more that I chew on Esther, the more I'm understanding it, the more I'm enjoying it. And so we're going to get into chapter 3 today without any further ado. So let's get started. So, Esther chapter 3, verse 1 says, after these things. So after these things, you have to understand there is I think it's a 4-year gap between chapters 1 and 2. And then there's a 5-year gap between chapters 2 and 3. So Esther's been queen for 5 years. So after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. And so we see this gentleman, Haman, kind of rise above the 7 princes. And I think that's kind of an interesting right there. And so he's from 7 rises 1. And so there's this, kind of reminds me too of like Daniel with the 10 horns and 1 rising out of the 10 horns. And I look at this as kind of a spirit of Antichrist. I have to credit Jack Hibbs. Jack Hibbs, it was probably 6 months ago or something. Somebody had sent me a link and I was watching him. And he introduced this theory that I was kind of fascinated with. One of those things where you go, that's interesting. Wow, that kind of rings true. And that was that his theory was that Satan doesn't know when Jesus is coming back, and so or all the prophecies, when are they going to come true? So all through time, he's had an Antichrist kind of hanging out in the wings. Sandra refers to them as sleeper units. He's had sleeper units that are just kind of ready to go. And I think Haman, just like the Antichrist in the end, or like the Antichrist with the Maccabees, his name escapes me right now. I can't think of its name, but Satan has people ready at all times. Hitler would be another one. It's the spirit of Antichrist. So anyways, we got Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. And so Agagites. What's the significance of Agagites? Well, you have to understand there's a long history, not with the Agagites, but with the Amalekites, of which an Agagite, we're going to quickly see here, is part of the Amalekites. Okay, so anyways, we start off with Abram back in Genesis 12:3. God says to Abram, I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And so there's a covenant established there. And so right from the get-go, people who bless Israel, there's a blessing. God blesses them. People who curse Israel, there's a curse that comes with it. And so we have to always be mindful of how we treat Israel, God's chosen people. And I think that even rings true to this day. We need to remember Genesis 12:3. But so there's that promise or covenant that started. Okay, well, lo and behold, coming out of Egypt, Moses and the gang are attacked by the Amalekites. Okay, and so you can find that these are descendants of Esau, by the way. Anyway, so and the thing that they were known for is they were known for nomadic plundering. What they used to do is they would attack the rear flanks of Moses and the gang coming out, which was typically the women and children. And so this is really, really low. And anyway, so it's in Exodus 17, verses 8 through 14. It says, now Amalekite, and that's a person, by the way, Amalek, came and fought Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, "Choose us some men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill, the rod of God in my hand." And so, anyways, as the story goes, as they're fighting them, Moses' arms get tired. You may remember that story. And so they sit him on a stone, and they got two people to prop up his arms. And as long as he prop up his arms, they're winning. And it ends with, and I think in verse 14, then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this memorial in the book and recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven." And so the descendants of Amalek are still around at this time, okay? And so Moses reminds God's people of going back to this Abrahamic covenant of blessing those who bless you and cursing those. Moses reminds Israel again in Deuteronomy 25 verses 17 through 19. He reminds Israel of what the Amalekites did and what is going to happen to them. And it says, "Remember what the Amalekites did to you along the way when you came out of Egypt, when you were weary and worn out. They met you on your journey and attacked all who were lagging behind us," which I talked about. "They had no fear of God. When the Lord your God gives you rest from the enemies around you in the land he's giving to you to possess in his inheritance, you shall blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget." So this is a reminder. I have these around the house. I have to-do lists, and here's your to-do list. When you get into the land, go finish this. This is unfinished business. Go finish this. Okay, and so I don't know if I read this yet. "I shall blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget." Yep. And so I wrote that similar to Mordecai's actions, to be written in the book, to be acted on later. Okay, so there we go. So I was kind of looking at the time frame here. If you look at, let's see what I have for dates. Okay, so the Amalekites were attacking Israel around 1440 BC, and so it's like they're settled in. It's like 440 years later. It's right around 1000 BC. God tells Saul, go wipe them out. And if you remember this, there's an interesting story that comes out of this. In the saying that you may have heard, obedience is greater than sacrifice. But anyways, it's Saul goes. God says, "Hey, okay, we're settled in. Go wipe these guys out." This is the king of Israel, by the way. Go wipe them out, and he almost wipes them out. And so he's going to spare one family. So hang on there. 1 Samuel 15, 7 through 9. "And Saul attacked the Amalekites from Havilah all the way to Shur, which is east of Egypt. He also took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag, and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatting lambs, and all that was good, and were unwilling to utterly destroy them. But everything despised and worthless they utterly destroyed." So that's 1000 BC, all right? And so Esther is right around 500 BC. So it's 400 years and some change went by before God, said, "Hey, okay, so I'll go destroy them." Well, he destroys everybody except the king and his family, and that's Agag. And so from there, this is 500 BC with Esther. The descendants of King Agag are now present with Haman. And so he's a direct descendant of the Amalekites. And so he's, and that's the thing too. You have to understand, we in America have short memories. And as a world history teacher, one of the things I always I'm always interested in is how people don't forget things. I mean, if you think about, well, you may not even think about this, but I went to Kosovo. I was when I was in the service. I went to flew missions out of Aviano into to support operation in Kosovo, and Slobodan Milosevic basically ran for president with the promise of, I will cleanse Kosovo. And you have to understand the story behind Kosovo. Gosh, I hate to bring it up because I haven't really gone and refreshed this, but I want to say it was in the 1300s. The Ottomans were coming up through Serbia, because every year they would do this. They go up through the Balkan Peninsula and take take young ladies, take young men, and go. They take the young men and turn them into Janissary, which are their fighting forces. But in the 1300s, they go in, and the Serbs send out this Serbian young prince and his army to face the oncoming Ottomans, utterly wiped out. Utterly wiped out. And it's sometime in the 1300s, and I don't remember off the top of my head the date. But in what was it? 1995, 96, whatever. Whenever Slobodan Milosevic runs, that's his campaign promise. I'm going to go cleanse Kosovo, which means ethnically cleanse it, and he does that. And so from the 1300s to the 1990s, there's a memory amongst the Serbs that they're going to revenge old things. We in America, we forget things like real quick, and so we don't get this. But I think because I have a theory here. Let me read this next section, but I'm going to present you with a theory because most people don't forget. Most cultures don't forget things that were wrong to them in the previous generations. And so it's not uncommon for something 500 or 1,000 years earlier to be remembered and to evoke emotion in people. And so here, I set that as my premise before I read you this next section. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were with the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command? Why won't you obey the law?" Now it happened when they spoke to him daily, and he would not listen to them, that they told it to Haman to see whether Mordecai's word would stand. For Mordecai had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay homage, Haman was filled with wrath, but he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. And so here's my two assumptions with that premise I kind of set up, that people have long memories. Cultures have long memories outside of ours. My theory is that an old rivalry is renewed. That both of these gentlemen have grasped who the other represents, and the history that the other represents. I think Mordecai remembers King Agag and knows that Haman is a descendant of that, and that those people are cursed by God. And I also think that Haman remembers the people of Mordecai, the Jews, and their attempt to wipe out the Amalekites and the Agag. And they didn't not kill King Agag, but the Agagites are descendants of the people who Israel tried to wipe out. So anyways, there you have it. That's my theory. It's two assumptions of the rivalry. People have been reminded of what has happened in the past. Anyways, verse 7. In the first month, which was the month of Nisan, the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is the lot, before Haman to determine the day and the month until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Okay, so here we have Haman. He wants to destroy the Jews, and now he's got to figure out a date. And so he's going to roll the dice to figure out the date. And so there's this attempt to somehow inject other forces, and I would even go so far as to say spiritual forces, into our decisions. Sometimes when if we have to make a decision, we roll the dice, or we play on Sandra was saying, play on a Ouija board and ask a Ouija board a question. And so there's there's this, sometimes when man doesn't want to make a decision, he kind of throws it to chance. And I think about, when it comes to casting lots, there's two times in the Bible when I think about casting lots. One is for Jesus' garments, and I don't think that really applies here, but the other one I think definitely applies here. When Judas killed himself, he betrayed Jesus and killed himself, the disciples, excuse me a second. The disciples cast lots to determine who should replace him. And I thought, oh, that's really wrong. I never was in agreement with that. It's like, why didn't you guys just wait? And I think that's just a tendency of us as Christians, as men. I'm not speaking of men, I'm speaking as mankind. We tend to, our clock is like, I want answers now, and God's clock and our clock very rarely sync up. And I think God had plans for Paul to be an apostle, and he had Paul being worked on, but the time wasn't, the disciples weren't, that's not quick enough for us. So that's when they cast lots, and you can find that in Acts. First chapter of Acts is when they cast lots, and they find a replacement for Judas. And so we've got here it's the 12th month. So they roll dice, and it falls on the 12th month. And so this is this is happening in the first month. So the Jews have this is going to be 11-month kind of a news cycle. In 11 months, this is going to happen. And so that's kind of unnerving, I guess. And so initially, it was kind of funny. If you go back and listen to chapter 1, I probably made some comments there, and the Lord has kind of already given me an answer. I kind of had looked at initially like this happened because the Jews hadn't gone home. I was wrong, and I'm going to retract that claim, that thought, that idea. The Lord kind of showed me some stuff in this chapter, and that was that had every single Jew left Susa, had left Persia. And so that's the thing you have to keep in mind. We look at Persia as Iran. You have to think Persian Empire. Okay? And so my thinking was, had all the Jews returned to Jerusalem, this probably wouldn't have happened. Wrong. I was wrong. Had all the Jews left except for Mordecai, this would have happened. Because if you take a look at the map, the Persian Empire at this time, you will find that it goes from, and I'm making this imaginary map in my head, and so as I'm looking at you, it goes all the way into Greece, all the way up against, actually down to Egypt, and it goes as far as India. And so you've got this huge swath, and Jerusalem is inside the Persian Empire. So had all the Jews left Persia, left captivity and gone back to the promised land, as long as Mordecai had stayed behind, this was coming back. And so it goes right back to that whole idea of this is something bigger than Mordecai. This is something bigger than Esther. This is kind of like the God showing that even though God's not in the book, he's not mentioned in the book. I apologize, that's the bass over there. Somebody's taken off. And so this is God finishing what he had promised to do a long time ago. So anyways, Persian, yep. I wrote, majority, if not all of the Jews alive are still living within the Persian Empire. Yeah, and so this is a threat against God's people. So, verse 8, then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed. That's one item. Among the people and all the prophets who came. Their laws are different from all the others peoples, and they do not keep the king's law. So there's three claims he's going to make there. Therefore, it is not fitting for the king to let them remain, if it pleases the king. We'll get back to that in a second. Let a decree be written that they should be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work to bring it into the king's treasuries. Okay, so first claim, a certain people scattered and dispersed. True. This is true. And why are they there? If you go back and look at Jeremiah 29:4, God did this. God dispersed them. It says, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all who were carried away captive, whom I have caused to be carried away. And so these people were scattered and dispersed because God had done that. So first statement he makes to the king, true. Laws are different from all other. This is half true, because you have to understand God gave Israel their laws, and their laws gave them the law, and that law was far superior to anybody else's law. And it's actually they talk about that in God talks about it in Deuteronomy 4, verses 6 through 8. Therefore, be careful to observe them. He's talking about the laws that he had given them. For this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of people who will hear all their statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has God so near to it as the Lord our God is to us? For whatever reason we may call upon him, and what great nation is there that has such statutes and righteous judgments as are in all the law, this law, which I have set before you this day. And so God did give Israel a law that was superior and different from all other. So it's kind of half true, but they're not really a nation. They're living there, but they do have the law. So it's kind of a half truth there. And here's the kicker though. Do not keep the king's laws. This is false, with the exception of Mordecai. Mordecai is not bowing, and so he is. Haman has twisted his argument with a truth, a half truth, and a falsification. But the king's swallowing it all. So there's that. And that's one thing too that's been interesting in these times, even specifically today. We wrestle with laws, and Romans 13, I would say in the last 2 years, Romans 13 has come more and more in my face. And in the first two verses, and I'll read it to you, it says, let every soul be subject to governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. And so there's this the claim about we don't keep the king's laws is actually a tough one, because we're told in Romans 13 to keep in mind that God put President Biden in place. God put Governor Inslee in place, and the laws that they have are part of the process for completing what God wants done. And so I do believe we're in the end times, just based upon those two men. And I found out yesterday that the governor has now mandated that all teachers be vaccinated, and so all people in education. So that impacts me. I'm being mandated to follow the law. And I was actually discussing with a friend of mine this morning, another teacher, about that hasn't been vaccinated either, and they were referring to was asking, what was I going to do? And I'm probably going to comply with the law. I'm going to comply with the law, because I had a long conversation with this last year as I was kind of arguing with the Lord, and I said, I at least conceded to the Lord. I said, Lord, because this is back with Romans 13, I was wrestling with that last year, and I said, Lord, if they say I have to be vaccinated, I'll be vaccinated. And I kind of conceded that to the Lord. And so when the governor came out and said that yesterday, and And I know a lot of my teacher friends who are not vaccinated were wrestling with that. For me, it was a settled argument. I'd already settled that with the Lord. So, but do not keep the king's laws. You have to understand we're commanded by God to respect those laws. And so there's an, even to this day, there's a little bit of invalid. This is somewhat invalid. However, in Acts, it does say that we should give God's law priority when it conflicts with man. Acts 5:9 says we ought to obey God rather than men. There will come a time when we must disobey the law, but it will cost us our. And actually, I put something. I got another thing in here. I got to fix my notes here. I think my mouse quit. Yeah, my mouse quit. That's weird. Anyways, there was something else I wanted to point out too, is that there is going to come a time when we have to disobey the laws, and that's in Revelation 20, verse 4, and in the end times, it's going to cost us our heads. It says, then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness. It's kind of bugging me. My mouse quit. I think the battery's old. There we go. It's working again. Then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word, who had not worshipped the beast or his image and had not received a mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And I was actually talking to a fellow teacher of mine that's unsaved at school before school let out, and I said, we were talking about what was going on in the world today and how governments are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and rights are being taken away all the time. And I said, dude, we're bumping up against the end times here, and at some point in time, I pray that you get saved. I pray that you make Jesus your Lord and Savior, and that when the rapture happens, when the Christians are taken up in the twinkling of an eye, that you go with me, buddy. And I said that, and I said because you're going to find out if when I disappear, I'm no longer here. For you to get saved, it's going to require your head. You're going to have to disobey the law, because the law is going to be you have to take the mark of the beast, and if you don't, you will lose your head. And that's at Revelation 24. So not keeping the king's law, I think until the tribulation, we will keep the king's laws. And so Romans 13 is kind of a heavy word for Christians today, that they have to kind of go with the system that's there because God ordained it. This is part of God's plan, and that's really a hard pill to swallow right now. But anyways, I thought that was interesting too. Just kind of backtrack there. Verse 9? Yeah, verse 9. If it pleases the king. Haman is just dialed into Xerxes. He knows Xerxes' weakness is pleasure, and so he's gonna, if it pleases the king, let me make it favorable to you. And one of the things he says is this is going to come no cost to you, king. Xerxes, no cost to you. I'll carry the cost. And he says 10,000 talents, and I kind of Googled that, and it appears to be around $3 million today. So that's a huge amount of money. So my first question was, okay, so in the big scheme of things, what is that sum of money to Persia? Persia was rich. So how much was $3 million to them? Well, I guess at the time, that was about a half a year's gross domestic product from Persia. Not that they had a gross domestic product, but it was about half of their earnings for a year. It's a sizable amount, okay? And so, and he offers him as kind of like oh, by the way, and once these people are killed, whatever money is taken from them, I'll surrender that to the government, okay? And so offers him this carrot, but it gets worse. But I thought this was interesting here too. Xerxes, and I've said this in, I think, chapter 2, I said My opinion of Xerxes keeps falling. And it fell even more with this chapter here for several reasons. First of which was when Haman is talking about a certain people and he lists those three things about them, the king either doesn't know or doesn't care about who these people are. And I thought, wow, Xerxes, don't you know the people in your own empire or don't you care? I mean, aren't you going to ask the simplest of questions to Haman? Who might these people be? Who are you referring to? I mean, simple question. He never asks it. And so it's kind of his lack of knowledge of care it's kind of strange. Anyways, verse 10. So the king took the signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you. Okay. And so we gave him his signet ring, okay. He gives it over to Haman. And you have to understand, okay, if you're familiar with powers of attorney, you have limited powers of attorney and you have unlimited powers of attorney. In limited powers of attorney, you give people authority to do a specific thing, and when that specific thing is done, they lose their authority. This is not a limited power of attorney. This is unlimited power. So things that can happen from here on out, Haman has unlimited authority. And I'm like, whoa. And so I was even thinking about who in my circle would I give unlimited authority to make decisions for me? And I had a discussion with Sandra, and obviously Sandra, my wife, and my sons, our sons. And so, but beyond that, my unlimited authority to speak on my behalf and to make decisions on my behalf. And you have to understand, that big map that I just went through, as far as Egypt to Greece to India. Sure, it's yours. So now this last whole part, the money and the people are given to you. Now this is kind of an interesting statement that Xerxes makes. And he's talking about giving him flexibility to pay for it. And there's one or two theories here about with regards to how this event is going to be paid for. When he says the money and the people are given to you, the money is given to you. So there's two theories, and I apologize for that as well. Got some aircraft taken off today. Actually sounds like something more than aircraft. Occasionally we'll get like big aircraft that come into the base here, and that sounds a little bigger than the normal aircraft that take off. Anyways, so two possibilities here. He's either saying, don't worry about the costs, I got the costs. Okay, this is King Xerxes. Or he's saying, I will pay you back, from the money that is recouped, I will make sure you get paid back. Either way, he's saying the money is given to you. So this scheme, this $3 million debt, there's no need for you to put your money out. And if you do put your money out, don't worry, you'll get paid back. This is kind of concerning to me too about Xerxes, that he says that. So he's pretty much, Xerxes is kind of partnered with Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Okay, so verse 12. Then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman commanded, to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to the officials of all the people, to every province according to its script, and to every people in their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus it was written and sealed with the king's signet ring. So all these details are hashed out by Haman, but it because he has the ring, it appears like it's the king's commandment. And in essence is the king's commandment. Okay? I thought it was interesting the date this is done, because it's the first month, the 13th day. Well, the first month, 14th day in the Jewish calendar is fairly significant. It's Passover. Okay? And I looked up, okay, what's the significance of the 13th day? Well, there is, the Jews are commanded, prior to Passover to get all the leaven out of the house, get all the sin out of the house. And so that 13th day, the day that this goes out, is the day that the Jews are supposed to be symbolically repenting of all the sin that they have, cleaning the leaven out, repenting of the sins that they have. So the Passover lamb, God's provision will take care of it. So anyways, kind of, once again, history teacher, boom, hits me over the head. Anti-Semitism done in broad daylight. And so I don't know if how familiar you are with World War II, the beginnings of it, with Germany and with Hitler, but anti-Semitism was done in in broad daylight in those times. For starters, Mein Kampf, Hitler wrote that while he was in jail. He wrote Mein Kampf, Mein Struggle, and he pretty much lays out exactly what's going to happen, including, what he plans to do with folks like the Jews. So that's in broad daylight. There's a meeting. This one, although wasn't done quite in broad daylight, Final Solution. There's a meeting that the Nazis have on how to solve the Jewish problem, the Jewish question, and the final solution is to get rid of them. And so from that meeting, one of the things that's done in broad daylight is what's called the Nuremberg Laws. The Nuremberg Laws strip Jews of citizenship, so they no longer have any rights. Done in public, okay? And then the next thing was they're going to eventually be rounded up in ghettos, and that's the beginning of the end. And then they're shipped off to concentration camps, which is ironic, too. If you look at where the concentration camps, they're mostly outside of Germany. So the Germans kind of somewhat oblivious to what's going on, even though it's happening in broad daylight, to be set free. These concentration camps, the work shall set you free. Yeah, all right. So anyways, anti-Semitism in broad daylight happening here as well. So what verse is this? Verse 13. And the letters were sent by couriers into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of this document was issued as law in every province, being published for all people, that they should be ready for that day. So this is not something done in secret. And it's in all the provinces, including Jerusalem, which must have been very interesting too. The people who had gone back, who had rebuilt the temple, who had rebuilt the walls, that was put there too. And it's going to be a one-day slaughter. On one day, you got 11 months, get ready, build whatever has to be built, round up whoever needs to be rounded up, and in 11 months, we're going to kill them all. And so I was thinking about too, this as a Jew, you're given 11 months notice that this is going to happen. What do you do? We'll find out in the coming chapters what happens, though, which I think is really good. Verse 15. The couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan, the citadel. So the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. Okay. The word for perplexed means confused here. And so everybody's scratching their head. What's going on here? Where'd this come from? This makes absolutely no sense. And if you think about the sum of money, 1/2 of Persia's income in a year is going to be dedicated towards ridding Persia of Jews. That tells you that there's quite a few Jews. And there had to have been people who lived next door to, hey, um, I can't think of a Persian name right now. Oh, hey, did you realize that next door, the king has said that our neighbors on either side, the Jews on either side, are going to be killed? And so there's a state of confusion amongst the people in the capital over, like, this doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't. It shouldn't. Yet the king and Haman are like, hey, let's drink. I'll drink to that. And so there's kind of you get the sense of the partnership between Haman and Xerxes. There's a partnership there, and part of me is upset that the king didn't ask, but there's part of me that kind of wonders, and this is just me totally reading between the lines, kind of wonders if Xerxes didn't have to ask because he knew who Haman was referring to. I have nothing to back that up with, but the way this chapter ends, you just kind of get this kind of numb feeling that these two are okay with it. Anyways, so I got some questions to ask you. First question is, taking into account God's reminder to totally wipe out the Amalekites and the Agagites, what are things in your life that God has asked you to eliminate totally that continues to haunt you? And that's one of those things too, where this. And let me back up here too. I like to leave questions concerning the content that has just been discussed that apply for today for you. And so these questions, quite honestly, are questions I'll ask myself after I've read this chapter. I'll look back and go, what are the long-lasting things that keep coming back to haunt me, that want to destroy me? What are the sins that I can't seem to kick? That I can't seem to conquer? One of the things I talked about in one of the earlier chapters was anger. Anger is something that continues to haunt me. That's my Amalekite. That's my Agagite. Whatever you want is that. And so, take a look at those. What are the Amalekites in your life? The Agagites in your life? Okay, that's the first question I have for you. I apologize. When you think about Haman's decree that gave the Jews 11 months to live, what would you do if you knew you only had 11 months to live? And this is kind of an interesting question for me too, because I know people who have been given, the death sentence of cancer, and it impacted them. That threat of death, imminent death, over the horizon death, changed them. And how would that change you? How would you live differently if you knew you were going to die in 11 months? And which is even more interesting, because if we are in the final times, like I think we are, we should all be living like 11 months from now, it's going to be over. And so that's kind of a, live each day like it's the last one. It kind of should be how we as Christians live, but we don't. I don't, anyways. Third question I have for you. This chapter ends with the enemy appearing to have everything in place to wipe out God's people. It is in these times that we need to hold on the tightest of the Lord. When life is at its hardest, how do you face each morning? As a child of the King or as an abandoned orphan? So what is our mentality? Do we go through life knowing that, hey, Governor Inslee is going to do these things, and do we, was it Eeyore on Winnie the Pooh? Do we have that whole kind of mentality of like, woe is me and nobody loves me, and I'm a victim. I'm like Esther. I'm an orphan. Or do we, or we just know God's got this. God's got this. I don't know how. I have no idea. I'm going to surrender to Him. I'm going to bow to Him. I'm going to praise Him, because He will never leave me nor forsake me. And so that's what I want to leave you with today. That's the thing of, we've all got to remember in these times, especially these end times, God will never leave us or forsake us. And so thanks for hanging out with me today, going through the third chapter. And so school's about to start. I don't know when I'm going to get to the fourth chapter, but I will do my darndest to stay in the Word and to study the Word and share the Word with you. So when that comes, I'll see you then, either here or in the sky, right? Take care. Bye-bye.